Hello everyone, welcome to the Narcissism Dakota, a YouTube channel that's designed to take a comprehensive look at the various facets of narcissism from different psychoanalytic perspectives. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Mazzella. In today's episode, we're going to continue our discussion on the paranoid narcissist. So this is part 2. If you haven't had an opportunity to look at part 1, now may be a good opportunity to go back and check out that video. The paranoia manifests, and this is what distinguishes the paranoid narcissist from other clusters or types of narcissism, is there's an unusual amount of paranoia. Although all narcissists may struggle from some level of paranoia, there's an unusual amount of paranoia in these individuals. In other words, there's an excessive level of irrational distrust of others. There's a constant vigilance for potential threats and betrayals, and there's a tendency to interpret innocuous events as some sort of covert attempt to undermine or harm them. In part 1, I asked everybody to keep in mind 2 important things that I said we would build on, and this is really going to set the stage for today's video. This will be the focus. Hopefully we'll cover this thoroughly enough. When we start looking at at facets of narcissism, this stuff gets complicated. So the goal today is to focus on the unusual amount of contempt and devaluation that these individuals use, and something in psychoanalytic terms that's called the purified pleasure ego, which I promised you in part 1 that we would return to. And it becomes particularly important to think about this concept when we are considering how to relate to these people or how to treat them. So in the first video on this topic, I left off by saying or asking you the question of, how does paranoia become compensatory? In other words, what I was suggesting is that the feelings of paranoia in a person with narcissistic traits serves as a way to compensate for or to cope with very deep feelings of shame, humiliation, and inadequacy. In other words, the paranoia, in part, is a way to protect themselves from perceived threats to their self-esteem and sense of self-worth. It's a mode of repair, and we looked at modes of repair when we spoke about the covert narcissist in an earlier video that I did. The mode of repair just means in each narcissistic cluster, the way they go about repairing an earlier childhood trauma varies. So in other words, all narcissists are not the same. The way they repair the damage is very different. And if we can understand the way they repair the damage, that will help us relate to them and treat them in a different way. Now you may be curious, how does the paranoid narcissist go about repairing deep feelings of inadequacy and shame created from the sadistic treatment they received in their formative years? As compared to the craving or the covert narcissist, the mode of repair in the paranoid narcissist is much more aggressive and hostile. It is expressed through argumentativeness, jealousy, suspiciousness, accusations. They feel a deep sense of disappointment and betrayal by those who they think have the power to give them something, to which of course they are entitled, but that the other person is withholding this. If you listen closely enough, you will hear in their complaints and jealousy portrayal a need for them to feel special, to be the selected one, the one who gets special attention. So let's think about this with the case that I gave in part 1. This was a case of John, a fictitious example that I gave of a patient of mine who was suffering with paranoid narcissistic characteristics and he came to me because he was having an incredibly difficult time holding down a job. He was fired from many of his prior places of employment. So John, in his complaints about his colleagues, and just by way of reminder, John was very suspicious and always vigilant of the comings and goings of his colleagues. He constantly watched them to see what time they would arrive, what time they would leave, how much work were they doing as compared to his workload. So as he would complain about this, which he would bring to his bosses, by the way, his superiors, and this is eventually what got him in trouble, because they would tell him just to focus on your own work, but he was so preoccupied with their work that he couldn't stop the smear campaign against them, and inevitably this would lead to his termination. But as we listened to his complaints, what we began to hear is, why do my colleagues get things? Why do other people get things? Like special care, they get to come in late, they get to leave early, their workload is different than mine, right? Why do they get the special care? Why do they get the sustenance? Why do they get the love, right, that I so desperately need? Although that's disavowed, they will never say, well, at least not initially until we can help them with this, that this is something that they long for. But the main complaint is, why do they get things that I don't get? And you may not see this, because on the surface, it just comes across as my colleagues don't deserve this, or what kind of workers are they, or they're so entitled, or they're lazy, or they're inept, right? So what I'm talking about here is all of this stuff right here that I'm telling you, these complaints, the accusations, all of this is what is compensatory. This is the mode of repair. But now you may be saying, wait a minute, how can complaints, suspiciousness, envy, jealousy, that doesn't lead to any kind of repair? Like, I'm a little confused. That only drives people away. And like with John, this got him in trouble, right? These kind of characteristics only get you in trouble with romantic partners, with your friends, your colleagues, your superiors at work. How is that possibly a mode of repair? And what benefit does that serve anybody to be engaging in these types of behaviors? For John, and for every narcissist to some extent, shame and humiliation are perceived as enemies of the grandiose self. So what is the most important thing for the narcissist? The grandiose sense of self, which gets played out in different ways depending on the cluster of narcissism. And shame and humiliation are the enemy of the grandiose sense of self. In other words, shame and humiliation are the biggest threat to the grandiose sense of self. So the goal then naturally would be to rid oneself of shame or humiliation or a shameful self-concept, right? So how does one rid oneself of a shameful self-concept? Through ejection, through evacuation, through projection, a term that I'm sure you're all familiar with in terms of thinking about the narcissist, right? That they project. So through projection, one can get rid of this shameful self-concept. That has to be, that which is taken in has to be pushed out. And this has to be done quite forcefully, by the way, because if we think about the childhood experiences of these individuals, this was something that was pushed into them quite forcibly. The simple example that I gave was, this is the kid who scrapes his knee. He comes home crying, looking for some kind of support and comforting. And he's received with a response from the family of something like, what's wrong with you? How are you so clumsy? Or alternatively, what are you doing to me? Why are you bothering me with this? Right? So the developing child begins to learn that they're a burden or that there's something wrong with them. And the family, the caregiver, has their own paranoid response. They feel attacked by the child's needs. And it's like from a very early age, the child is embedded in a world of paranoia, right? And just as a very quick digression, this is an important distinction because sometimes when I'm listening to the social media content, YouTube, for example, I will frequently hear that at the core of nothing is different. The core of the narcissist, it's all the same. It's just a poisoned core inside of them, right? And that hasn't been my experience, because the mode of repair, which is different for each cluster of narcissism, is part of the personality. This is part of who they are. And each cluster of narcissism, type of narcissist, uses a different mode of repair. Remember, just again, I know I'm digressing, but the covert narcissist uses what as a mode of repair? Remember the whining, complaining, demanding, pouting, I'm a victim? See, that's very different than the mode of repair is contempt, devaluation, suspiciousness, and paranoia. So I digressed a little bit, but the main point that I was trying to make is from a very early age, these individuals grow up in a family environment that treats them in a more hostile way than, let's say, for instance, the covert or the craving narcissist. There's more paranoia, more aggression, more hostility, and that's why their mode of repair tends to be more hostile. So let's go back to the purified pleasure ego, a psychoanalytic concept that I asked you all to keep in mind, because this is what's going to help us understand these individuals in a much more complicated way. The purified pleasure ego in this example is when John can project out all the shame, humiliation, and bad feelings and put them onto somebody else, he rids himself of this. And that is a wonderful, amazing feeling. And that is the purified pleasure. You're pure again. Everything good is in you. You see this? Everything bad in him gets split off and projected and put into other people. And that leaves in him what? Everything that's good and valuable. Again, for John, he found in his colleagues' behavior what can be considered a perfect fit. In other words, he found in the external environment for his projection, and he could judge his colleagues and feel purified. So contempt and devaluation, two other concepts that I asked you to keep in mind that I said we really need to understand if we want to understand the paranoid narcissist, is John, like many paranoid narcissists, saw exploitative motives in everyone. And this allows him to constantly be contemptuous of them, critical, argumentative. The others are devalued. This is the contempt and devaluation that becomes so important to them. It's the other people, his colleagues, who do not complete their work, or who do sloppy work, or who cheat, who lie, who complain, who are lazy, etc. You've heard all these complaints before. All right, so this leads into the last part of this video, and something that we want to address is, knowing all this now, how do we treat this kind of patient? Or let me say that a little differently. How do we relate to somebody like this in our lives? So before we can think about how to relate to these individuals or how to treat them, we first need to ask, what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? Looking at the social media content or listening to podcasts, this is what I hear most frequently. And you can tell me if you think this is the goal. Almost always, by the way, you can't help these individuals. You need to get away from them. They're not going to change. This is just who they are. Okay, so that's the first thing that I hear. That's an overwhelming amount of people have that opinion. Other people who go a little bit further may say that you need to set boundaries, right? Or help these individuals set boundaries, encourage empathy and perspective taking, teach them coping strategies, or teach the people who have these individuals in their life coping strategies on how to deal with them. I'm sorry to say that I don't think, the answer would be no, that I do not believe that any of these are reasonable goals. Why? Because in all of these, it's like you're telling somebody how they should or shouldn't behave. In other words, you're telling them who they are is not acceptable. But then you could argue with me, but who they are is not acceptable. And that may be true. But once you start telling somebody, a grown adult, how to behave, I think you probably already know. What happens when you tell somebody to do something? You get what's called the boomerang effect. That if they're not open to hearing this, they're going to do the opposite. So what I've noticed now is there's, I think, probably much more to say on this topic of how to relate to them. And we're running a little bit long, and I mentioned at the beginning of this video that we may not get it all in, and we may have to push this to another video. But I think for now, let's just let's leave it on this note, and I'll give you something to think about until we meet again, which is, given the theory that I laid out, given the mode of repair, and given the purified pleasure ego, let's say, how can we use all these things in order to foster empathic attuneness with these individuals that it eventually will facilitate some level of change? Okay, we have to leave it there for now. We'll take this up in the next episode. Until then,